Hey everyone, I am Dawn, and I work for Rise, and we're a digital agency, and we believe that we can help our clients change the world. And so that's the perspective that I approach branding. So thinking about what's your thing, it's really about personal branding, and it's taking your thing and finding a way to relate that to other people. So if you think about how you present yourself to the world, it used to be pretty easy. You know, you show up in a suit and you talk the business language and you're pretty much in. Moving forward a little bit in time, personality was a big deal too, so if you had the right fit. And now even you don't have to be in a suit to have a personal brand. There's folks out there who are really memorable for thinking outside of the box and breaking the rules a little bit. So for better or worse, if you think about your personal brand, it's what people think of you and how they're going to remember you moving forward. Now taking that online is a little bit different, because when you're one-on-one with somebody, you can look in their eyes. You know, you can see them smiling, you can get to know their personality a little bit better. And some people feel like it's a truer sense, you know, because when you're online, you can write and think about what you're going to say before you say it. And you can only post the really good pictures of yourself up. And on person, you don't really get that luxury. So looking at some of the mediums online for branding, social media is a huge one. And I'm going to use my client Grant Hill as an example because he has branded himself very well across several mediums. So when you go to a social media page, this is his Twitter, there's no doubt that it's Grant Hill, you know? You've got his picture on the top, picture on the side, it says Grant Hill all over it. But what's really interesting about Grant is when he came to Rise, he was just ending his career at the Orlando Magic, and his brand was very, very tied to that basketball team. So we wanted to create a brand for him that was more universal, something that could exist beyond his basketball career. So we created the Hill brand. And that gives him the opportunity to talk about other platforms that he's passionate about. So he can talk about what he's doing with White House. He can talk about what he's doing with fitness. And because he's a big family man, he can talk about his wife who's dropping a major album like right now. Another great opportunity online is your emails. So again, no doubt it's Grant Hill. It's got a consistent logo, consistent type, and it's got his face on it, so we definitely know it's Grant. And he's also aligning himself with folks that share the same beliefs, so it's good for his brand. And then his website. I consider everyone's website to be almost like home base, you know, because that's where you're blogging, it's where you're talking, it's where you control the most. And again, no doubt it's Grant, but he's also highlighting the things that are important to him right off the bat. So he's got his health tips. He's got how he's giving back to the community. And basketball is still a big part of it. So he's got a scoreboard, and if you were to click through the slides, you would see even more basketball stuff. And digging deeper into his site, on his blog role is the opportunity for him to be a thought leader. And you can think about a thought leader as, well, it's somebody who's leading with their thoughts, you know? So it gives him a platform to talk about what he's passionate about and let other people read and get on board or talk back to him or comment. Make sense so far? Cool. So online branding, summarize. Anything you do, say, or upload online can be accessed 24/7. So unlike those one-on-one meetings, you can't go home and put on your PJs and look unprofessional. Online, you're on 24/7 because you never know who's going to log in. And it's really hard to control who can and can't see it. So you have to be very aware of what you're putting out or not putting it out. And it's even harder to delete it later if you do make a boo-boo, because once it's out, it's kind of out. So let's talk about why this is so important. In one day, 294 billion emails are sent. 2 million blog posts are written. 172 million people visit Facebook. 40 million visit Twitter. 22 million visit LinkedIn. 532 million statuses are updated, 250 million photos are uploaded, and a whole lot of video gets uploaded to YouTube. And more iPhones are sold in one day than people are born. True story. So 75.5% of the US population uses the internet, and that is a lot of people. So what does that mean to us as digital media professionals, folks trying to get our message out? Well, when the internet first started on the World Wide Web, it wasn't so noisy. You know, when you posted your status message or your blog, you weren't competing with so many people. But now that 75.5, just in the USA alone, are competing with you and posting constantly. So it's hard as consumers of media to find what you're looking for, and it's incredibly hard for you to stand out and be found. And that's why I believe branding is so important, because for me, example, there's a ton of brand managers out there, but how do I distinguish myself as someone different? So what's your thing? The goal in this part of the presentation is to take a step back and understand what you've been doing in the past, understand what you're doing right now, and then understand how that can mix and relate into where you want to go with your brand. So, brand history. When I do this exercise, I usually lock myself in a room with a piece of paper, and I sit down and I think about how I've identified myself in the past. So for me, I did a lot of stuff. I was an improviser, I was a professor at UCF, still am. I directed broadcasts in India. I was a doer, not a talker, which is pretty cool, I think. And I was a Scottish dancer. And I prided myself on how much I threw myself into my work. So I said I had a big heart, especially for work. And once you get all of that out, you can set it aside for a second, because we want to talk about what you're currently saying. So if you were to pop open your social media or pop open your website, what are you talking about? So when I did this was a couple months ago, this is the conclusion I came to. I'm definitely a brand manager at Rise, because my stuff was like a billboard for us. I talked a lot about coffee, probably because I was pulling a lot of long hours. I've got 2 dogs, so I talked about them a lot. That's pretty much all the photos I posted. And I was a client advocate, so when I could, I'd talk about them. And you guys notice how all except for the dog part relates to Rise? And I realized I'd been defining myself by my work. You know, I was Dawn the brand manager, or Dawn the professor, Dawn whatever, throughout my history and my current. And I'm more than my job. I have to be, because there's a million other brand managers out there. So how do I be different? So it's a problem. So moving to where you want to go, I recommend starting with why. Simon Sinek says people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So if you look at most companies and most individuals, they've got a really good idea of what they do. And if they're any good at their job, if they're worth their salt, they probably have a good idea of how they do it. You know, so if they're a car manufacturer, they know they make cars, they've got a pretty good idea how they put those cars together. But it's pretty rare to get to the why. You know, so why cars? Why are you putting that together? For me, why am I working with these brands? Why am I trying to give people a story? And if you can answer that, and it's usually not something you can think of in a second, it's one of those things you kind of have to think about and dream about and pull your hair out about. But if you can get that golden nirvana, then you've got something really cooking to work on your future brand. So your desired brand. For me, I want to be known for branding. I want to be known as fearless, both in the choices that I'm making for my brand and in my personal life. I want to be known for transmedia and storytelling. And I want to be somebody who goes on adventures and talks about those. and as someone who gets people. And you'll notice I'm still talking about work because work's a big part of me. And I'm one of those people that really likes my job, so it's more than just a 9 to 5 for me. And I'm guessing since you guys are all here for a conference all weekend, it's probably more than just a 9 to 5 for you guys too. So it might be kind of weird if it's not a part of your desired brand. And the reason why I start from where you were, where you are, to where you want to go is because if you just open the door with where you want to go, and there's not that throwback to where you were, it's kind of weird. You know, it's kind of weird for the people who have known you for so long. Like if I were to walk out and said, you know, I'm going to do basketball, and I've never touched a basketball in my life, it's weird, you know? So once you've got an idea of what that might look like, if you can say it in a sentence, because people can't remember a whole lot, especially when you're first meeting them, you've got something going. So I always tell people, and I tell myself this a lot, to keep it simple, stupid, you know? Because when we're talking about ourselves, we want to tell the whole story. But most of the time, people just want a little crumb. And if they like the crumb, then they'll want a little bit more, and then you can give them a little bit more, and it can snowball until eventually they get the whole story. But in the beginning, you've got to keep it simple, stupid. I was recently in Seattle, and I'm one of those geeks that when I go on vacation, I like to go to lectures and talks. So I went to a lecture and talk by Dr. Jack Horner, and he's one of the guys who worked on Jurassic Park as one of the scientists to say, you know, in real life, if we could bring dinosaurs to life, here's how we might approach that. And he walked in and had the most beautiful one-sentence personal brand story. He said, I'm Jack Horner, and I'd really like to make a dinosaur. And I don't know about you guys, but I would listen to anything this man said after that. So I liked the crumb, and so he gave me a little bit more. And he said, before Michael Crichton wrote this story, we didn't think it was possible to make a dinosaur. So we tried it. Turns out it didn't work. So we've got an inkling of where he is and an inkling of where his past has been. Then he says, right now, I'm trying to turn a chicken into a dinosaur. And I'm going to call it Dino Chicken. I would listen to anything he says because it's interesting, it's clear, it is really compelling. The next thing I always ask my clients is, what's the obvious? Because if it's an obvious oscillation, an obvious story, then there's probably somebody out there who's already doing it, which might not be the best option if you're trying to stand out for your own stuff. And so I ask, is there a way to be more inventive or compelling? This is, you know, it's always like the multi-billion-dollar question. You know, how can you be more interesting than anybody else, more compelling than anybody else? Innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower, and Mr. Jobs said that. And so I wish there was secret sauce on how to, you know, wake up and have the most amazing idea. But I think it comes from really knowing yourself and really knowing what you're trying to accomplish. So for Apple, if they would have just said, you know, we build computers, and that's it, which they could have, we wouldn't have the iPhone. We wouldn't have an iPod. But because they approached it and they said, we want to be a company that's inventive, something more than just what they do, they're able to move into those avenues. So as you're thinking about your brand and what you want to do and what you want your thing to be, think about the greater picture for how you could approach that. So now that you've kind of got a sense for what your thing might be, your why, the next step is being able to communicate that online. So I believe relationships are built on trust. And online, there's a few key indicators on whether or not something's trustworthy. So if you can find it, that means if you're on all the spaces that your followers might expect you to be on, so if you're on Facebook, or you're on Twitter, or let's say your blog's about cooking, If you're on the channels about cooking, you've got a greater chance of being found by those people. If what you're throwing out there is usable. So that might mean on your website are all the buttons in the places that you think they might be in. Does it make sense? Is your message clear? So some of that is consistency. So like when I was showing you the stuff for Grant, how it always had his name on it, it always had his photo on it. It was just being clear that it was coming from him and not some other basketball player or some other person. And then finally, is your message compelling? Because if you can compel somebody to act, they're more than just a passive reader. They're an advocate for you and your brand, which is like the holy mecca of followers. All of those combined in the right way enable trust. But if you don't have those or they're a little funky, then they inhibit trust, which makes it really hard for you to build those relationships. Moving to the day-to-day, because we can talk about philosophy all day and how great that is. But you still have to be able to do it, right? So I recommend making a cheat sheet. So it might mean making 5 status posts that you know are on brand for who you want to be, and continuing to make those until you figure it out, until it feels comfortable for you, because you are trying on almost a new character. It's still you, but it's the bigger and better you. I recommend starting small and then building on it. A lot of times when I give this conversation to my clients, they're like, great, I need a website, and I need a Twitter, and I need a Facebook, and I need an iPhone so I can get on Instagram, and I need all these things. And then when I hand them the bill, they're like, oh, maybe I don't need all of those things. So it's okay to start small, even if it's just getting a Facebook page. That's still something better than nothing. And then once that's cooking, you can move to a website. Once that's cooking, you can keep building and building and building. I recommend scheduling how much content you want to create and making sure the schedule is doable. I know at Rise, we blog twice a week, give or take, and I have the hardest time blogging even once a week. So you got to find what works for you. So it might mean maybe I only do once a week, but I blog for everybody else all the time. Or it means I'll do 1 or 2 status posts a week or a day. It just depends on what you're trying to do. And if you want to be a blogger, you should probably do more blogs. If you want to be a social media expert, you should probably do more social media. So you can really customize it to what works for you and your lifestyle. And then I would put a date in your calendar to review your brand, because it's going to change. And as long as you're aware of what's resonating with people and what's not, you can start to tailor and fine-tune your message. So the takeaways, your voice will evolve, and don't be afraid of that. I would embrace that. When you make your brand, make sure who you want to be is someone that your boss doesn't want to fire. Because that's important. And if you're looking for a job, it would be kind of cool that you were someone that your potential boss would want to hire. So as you're moving through the conference, I encourage you to think about what's it going to take to achieve your objectives. And everybody I know is going to have a different objective, but what's it going to take to get there? I can guess it's going to take a lot of hustle, no matter what your objective is. But what else is it? Why not you? Why can't you do that objective? And if there is a good reason, what can you do to get around the reason? And lastly, why not now? Why can't you do it right now? And if you can't, what can you do to get around it? If you try it, keep me posted. You can email me or tweet me, and I'd be delighted to answer those questions.